Testing. All right, well, I'll just step back. Maybe that'll work better. So anyway, so this clerk in Green Bay ended up creating an email trail of objections. She went on leave 7 days before the election because she couldn't tolerate private corporations running the election administration in Green Bay. So that's how it all started. One election integrity hero, and now we're at the end filing this lawsuit in the Wisconsin Election Commission against Madison for doing the same thing. But I need to provide you details on why this lawsuit happened. The lawsuit happened because there was an investigation of what occurred in Green Bay, and in Green Bay we found out those things that Chris Teskey had found out. And so that's where it all started. The Wisconsin Voters Alliance, Ron Hoyer, saw those emails. Matt Kittle, the investigative journalist, saw those emails. And basically, we started from nothing. And look where we are now. We're standing at the Capitol steps and we're having an election integrity rally. Before you, these private corporations running your election administration in Wisconsin outnumbered you 1,000 to 0. Think about that. Think about how easy it was for these corporations to come into Green Bay, Milwaukee, Kenosha, Racine, and now Madison, and engage in your election administration. It was so easy because they outnumbered us 1,000 to 0. And now it's different because it's 1,000 to 1. This is big news. It's big news, Wisconsin, because we're not outnumbered 1,000 to 0 anymore. We're only outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and we're going to fight back. And this is such a beautiful day to fight back. And so we're dealing with the biggest and most worthy opponents you can imagine. Mark Zuckerberg and his spouse put $400 million into affecting election administration in urban areas. They weren't doing it statewide. They were doing it in urban areas. They weren't doing it nationwide. They were just doing it in swing states, primarily Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. And they would have gotten away with it. But the Green Bay City Clerk said no. Under Wisconsin law, the city clerk runs the election. That's a good law. It's a good law. Why do we love that law? Because the city clerk takes an oath to be fair and impartial, to follow state law, to follow the Constitution. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And then, in its wisdom, the Wisconsin State Legislature formed, not on the seventh day, but formed the Wisconsin Election Commission to have general authority to run your elections. And so between the Wisconsin Election Commission and the clerk, Wisconsin citizens know exactly who has the authority to run the election. There could be no mistakes. And then, thanks to the wisdom of the Wisconsin State Legislature, you have the best law in the country regarding voters standing up and saying, election officials, you violated the law. It's a beautiful thing. Wisconsin statutes chapter 5 and 7 indicate that a voter can sue their election officials if they violate election law. That lawsuit goes to the Wisconsin Election Commission, so that's why I'm here. You know, other swing states don't have that great law. This is a populist state. You have populist laws. The voters can step up and say, you violated the election law. So here we are in Madison, and before we're in Kenosha, Racine, Milwaukee, and Green Bay. This is the fifth of 5 administrative complaints, and here are the violations of law. This is what you need to know. You need to know, one, under state law, it's the election officials, the clerk who has the state authority, and that the state legislature enacts the state law that the clerk is supposed to follow and the Wisconsin Election Commission is supposed to follow. And then the U.S. Constitution Articles 1 and 2 put the state legislature in charge of elections. So when the election officials and the Wisconsin Election Commission are following state law, then they're following the U.S. Constitution because the state legislature is in charge. When the Zuckerberg money came in, they were working with 5 mayors. They dubbed themselves the Wisconsin Five. They had their own letterhead with 5 seals. I mean, can you imagine that? It's like a group of nation states. The state of Wisconsin only has 1 seal. The Wisconsin 5 had 5 seals, 5 times more important, at least in their view. They also talked about putting out t-shirts, the Wisconsin 5 t-shirts. It was all about Wisconsin election administration, right? And so what they did was CTCL, working with these 3 mayors apparently, Kenosha, Racine, and Green Bay, who were formerly all members of the General Assembly, you know their names, Mason, Greenridge, so forth. They went to CTL, or CTCL went to them and said, we'll give you $100,000, Racine, but what we want you to do is jointly apply for more money. And we haven't got the emails from Racine yet, but it looks like the so-called Wisconsin voter plan, the Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan 2020, may have been put together by CTCL, not the mayors. It doesn't look like it was drafted by the mayors. So imagine $100,000 to Racine, $10,000 to each of the 4 other Wisconsin 5 cities. They're supposed to put together the plan, but it looks like the plan was actually drafted by CTCL. Why go through all that paperwork unless you're trying to hide something, right? And then the Wisconsin Legislative Council has notified the Attorney General, these 5 mayors were meeting under a Racine Resolution Council decision, and was that subject to the open meeting law? When 5 mayors are convening to develop a plan for election administration privately funded by CTCL under a Racine resolution, you have the mayors of Milwaukee, the mayor of Madison, the mayor of Green Bay, and Kenosha operating under a Racine resolution. That's strange, right? It looks like they're trying to hide something. Well, anyway, from that, it was approved, I think, about June 3rd. There were only 12 days to put together the Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan 2020. We don't know who drafted that. We believe it might have been CTCL. We're investigating that. But the point is, when you look at it, it has very little to do with COVID. Everyone was told, oh, Zuckerberg and these people are putting this money in because of COVID. What it really related to was a conditional grant. That is, they would give the cities the money, but then they would say, if you didn't do what we wanted, we can take the money back. Now, Center for Tech and Civic Life is from Chicago, and everyone knows how Chicago operates. You know how a bribe goes, right? And the bribe goes, here's the money, I'll give you the money if you do what I want, but this is more sophisticated. I gave you the money, I'm gonna take the money back if you don't do what I want. You see the little flipperoo there? And so it wasn't a conditional grant, it was basically a way for them to get in there. And soon enough, Center for Tech and Civic Life in each of the cities now, Green Bay, Kenosha, Racine, Milwaukee, and Madison, each of the cities, after the Common Council approved the grant, it doesn't appear that Common Councils, any of the cities, including Madison, knew what the Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan was. They didn't approve the Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan 2020, they approved a resolution accepting the money. You see the distinction? So talk to your Common Council members. They may not have known this. I think in Green Bay they didn't know it. I think in Racine they didn't know it. I think in Kenosha they didn't know it. I think in Milwaukee they didn't know it. And maybe in Madison they didn't know it either. So you see the problem there is the mayors cut a deal with the Center for Tech and Civic Life, basically saying this is how the election is going to be run. And the number one priority of the Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan was increasing absentee ballot turnout, which is not allowed under Wisconsin law. The election officials are supposed to make voting available. They're not supposed to solicit people to vote. In fact, it's the Wisconsin election officials' job, it's their job to enforce this law against you. Imagine that, right? That why Wisconsin's concerned about absentee ballot harvesting is chain of custody. They want the voter to put the vote in the box, all right? We don't want other people in the chain of custody. It's a security measure, right? So don't let the left describe this and say, oh, you're silly to be concerned about that. No, we're concerned about it because we want an accurate count. If someone's handling someone else's ballots, they can be manipulated. So that's the reason is. So here's the big one. The top line is that your law enforcement officers, your election law enforcement officers, are responsible for ensuring there's no absentee ballot harvesting. Got it? So here, through these contracts and through the engagement of these private corporations, they were on the other side. So they're on the other side. That means they've chosen to participate in absentee ballot, whatever you want to call it, absentee ballot increases, grooming, whatever you want to call it. They're on the other side. So the last election officials in Wisconsin who would enforce bans on absentee ballot harvesting are in Green Bay, Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, and Madison. So think about that. Your law is no one else can handle those ballots. It's a violation of the prohibition on absentee ballot harvesting, and that's where we've gotten. That's where we've gotten, and that is that your law enforcement officers are now on the side of the election law violators. And so how can you enforce the law when you're violating it? You know, and the left will say, well, where's your proof of voter fraud? Well, that's just a distraction. You're violating the law that you're supposed to enforce. You can't go on the other side. You can't become a campaign. You can't become an organ of Zuckerberg. You can't become an organ of Center for Tech and Civic Life. You can't become an organ of the Vote at Home Institute. So anyway, so what happened after these conditions were approved by the Common Council, then the Center for Tech and Civic Life invited in a Zoom phone call. It was like, just sort of like, we got the one in Green Bay, now we got the Zoom phone call in Kenosha and Racine and Milwaukee. And here, same formula every time. Come to our Zoom phone call and we'll introduce you to our technical partners. Well, the technical partners were funded also by the left, and they were subject matter experts. So in these 5 cities, the Center for Civic Design, for example, designed a whole new ballot for these 5 cities without Wisconsin Election Commission oversight, without any of that. They designed the instructions, the ballot, they redesigned the envelope and so forth. We don't know if it was used because even the Wisconsin Election Commission said, well, wait a minute, you know, the Wisconsin 5 can't do completely their own thing, but we're looking into that. Vote at Home Institute, they're involved with actually introducing the idea of vote navigators. These were privately recruited, privately trained, privately financed, nominally public employees who went out and did what we would think would be absentee ballot harvesting, but because they were nominally public employees, well, then it's fine, right? In Racine, they purchased a $250,000 Winnebago as a mobile voting precinct, not authorized by law. I mean, each of these cities was pushing the other. Green Bay, they got 2 trucks to do similar things. And so that's where that's at. So where does this lead then is not, it ended up being $7 million in a pay-for-play scheme. Zuckerberg said, here's $7 million, Wisconsin 5. And then CTL said, you have to engage these private corporations in your election administration. Okay, who's going to pay that kind of money to get access to the ballot box if they don't want to affect the result? Is that kind of obvious? And then look at this, Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan. Why don't you be honest? It was the Wisconsin 5 Safe Voting Plan, right? There's a big difference between spreading all that money, all that focus on absentee ballot turnout statewide. They were just focusing on urban areas to turn out the urban vote, which is more liberal. If that isn't obvious, it should be. And they're going to come back and say, oh, it's fine. Where's your proof of voter fraud? We don't need to prove voter fraud. We need to show that election officials operate illegally at the behest of big corporate billionaires, and that's enough. That's enough. We've already proven our case. And you know, the establishment media, it's a real problem for them because they've invested so much that everyone who stands up here and says, I want election integrity is a liar. Well, am I a liar when I have emails showing the depth that CTCL went to introduce private corporations to engage in election administration? They engage in election administration on a day-to-day basis to affect the result, as shown in the Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan 2020. Number 1 item, increase absentee voter turnout. That's just wrong. We're a witness to what happened. You choose your religious tradition, right? For me, I'm a Christian witness to a moral wrong. It's legally wrong, it's morally wrong, it's wrong. And this has to be rooted out of Wisconsin. Now let's go back to a big point, and that is we have worthy opponents. They set out at the beginning knowing they were going to violate the law, and they thought violating the law was worthwhile. That's why we're here. We're here because the other side doesn't operate in good faith. If they don't like a law, they'll violate it. So this is about our country. This is about saving elections, saving our soul. Now, it's really important. It's really important to understand what happened, and that is, out-of-state corporations came in at the behest of your 5 liberal mayors of these cities, and they engaged in election administration to affect the presidential result. They did it because they thought it was worthwhile to operate illegally, and now they won and they're encouraged. And it was 1,000 to 0, and now it's 1,000 to 1. You know, because of you being here in the Wisconsin Voters Alliance, they are now contested. They have to show the facts. Now, the mainstream media has done nothing for us. They've done nothing. They don't report on facts anymore. Journaling used to be going out and making observations. One journalist, though, we have to point out, has stood above the rest, and that's Matt Kittle at Wisconsin Spotlight. He has reported on the facts as emails came out. The dailies, the television stations, they failed. So you read Matt Kittle's Spotlight on Wisconsin, and you'll catch up because it's all fact-based. So I want to introduce the complainants here. Yai-Ping Liu, could you raise your hand? Right here. Could you give him a round of applause? He's from Madison. Then Mary Baldwin. There's Mary. And Bonnie Held.
Hey, Bonnie.
And so now we're going to have one of the another speaker here, Mr. Fitzgerald. Are you ready?
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, and thank you for being here. I'll stay up here. I'm the chair of Brown County Republican Party. Transparency. And that's all we're asking for here today. This is our 5th stop, as Eric Cardell mentioned, as our attorney mentioned. But I'm here today for several reasons. Among the most important is to restore the integrity of the ballot box to the voters of the state of Wisconsin. On 10/29/2020, I was made aware that the mayor's office in the city of Green Bay had involved a third-party interest with close ties to Democratic operatives to assist in running the central count location for the November elections. At that time, I was also made aware the city clerk's office and county clerk's office had not been involved in the usual process in terms of setting up and running elections. In a letter to the mayor, I stated, quote, "This was beyond concerning and unacceptable," unquote. I added that the voters of Green Bay demand transparency and should know who the third party is, what role it has played in early voting, what role it will play on Tuesday, and why the city and county clerk's office have now and will not be performing their normal legal required duties. And I ended by saying simply this: if in fact the city has outsourced the city clerk's or county clerk's election responsibilities to a third party, it would be a serious violation of state statute.
You're right.
So let's take a look at how that election process works. I'm a simple man. I need pictorials. Can you bring that up, please? Yep. The United States Constitution clearly lays out that every state has the right under the state and their state legislature to appoint who they want to, how they want their elections run in the state of Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Election Commission is the chosen vehicle in the state of Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Elections Commission then details to the municipal clerks how the process will run, how it will work, who they report to, what the reporting process is, what the process is in general. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a simple process. You don't have to be a Rhodes Scholar to figure out, and we were hornswoggled. Now, the steps, if you follow, the green arrows are pretty simple. However, between the second and third step here, thanks, Vanna, we took a U-turn, and private activists entered the fray. And I don't know about the rest of the cities factually yet, but I can tell you this: in the city of Green Bay, they took over the elections. And that is not right, and that should be contested, and that's why we're here today. Wisconsin statute 7.15 has with regard to supervising registration and elections. Each municipal clerk shall perform the following duties and any others which may be necessary and properly conduct elections or registration. These duties and responsibilities include equipping the polling places, maintenance and purchase of election equipment, prepare ballots, distribution, manage. It goes on and on. It's clearly stated what the responsibilities of our clerks are. And these clerks were not, at least in the city of Green Bay and Brown County clerk, were kept out of the process completely. The election was hijacked. No way, shape, or form differently. When the CTL grant proposal was brought forward to the Common Council of the City of Green Bay on July 21st for approval, there was no city-specific election plan in place. Rather, the plan was developed after the funds were received with the mayor, the assistant to the mayor, and the private corporation leveraging the conditions imposed, which were ostensibly intended to ensure a COVID-19 safe election. A COVID-19 safe election. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, right. That wasn't the case. The minute that the proposal was granted, we find that there were steps taken to initiate further influence from outside in organizations, adding satellite locations to streamline onboarding processes for early in-person absentee voting staff to be conducted by CTL's partner, the Elections Group, which we now meet, adding drop boxes, targeting communities with election information through National Vote at Home Institute's communication toolkit to, I quote, support outreach around absentee voting and to, quote, share research insights about how to engage people who might not trust the vote by mail process. And last, explaining this targeting of communications, the mayor, then Chief of Staff Celestine Jeffries, wrote to Whitney May of CTCL on August 27th that there are probably 5 organizations that are focused on working with disadvantaged populations and or with voters directly. Ladies and gentlemen, that's against the law. Yeah. It is not written in law that that's how an election runs. Today, we are 207 days away from the date that I mailed the letter to the mayor of the city of Green Bay asking for transparency. And I've heard nothing. I've heard a phony report come out of his office about the election being the best run election ever. I've heard nothing. And our process of discovery as it is related to the lawsuit only raises additional questions, as Attorney Cardell mentioned to you earlier today. The solution is simple, my friends. Whenever private corporations place conditions on a municipality's election with Common Council approval, those conditions must be presented to the Wisconsin Elections Commission for approval, which can only be granted if the private corporate conditions on federal elections comply with state and federal law. That's the law as it exists today. These simple steps were not followed, and as a result, the 2020 election process in Green Bay and the other 4 cities was riddled with irregularities and is now subject to entirely justified suspicions. Today is the day that we thought we would get some answers. WEC has informed us that the date we're moving the goalposts. It's now going to be June 15th. My friends, we must hold them accountable. We must get answers to this question, and we must restore integrity to the voting process in the state of Wisconsin. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dick.
Ron, do you want to go?
Yep.
My name is Ron Hoyer. I'm the president of Wisconsin Voter Alliance. Now, we're a group of, originally there were a group of people in Kewaunee County, concerned citizens back in the month of September, that got together and said, uh-oh, these elections are going to be stolen from us as a result of the Zuckerberg money. So we got involved in this very early in the game. In fact, on October 5th, we filed our first suit against the City of Green Bay and WEC because of the money that was flowing in from Zuckerberg. That was at a federal court level, and they threw us out because, they threw the case out because we didn't have standing. We, as Wisconsin Voter Alliance, were a Kewaunee County-based organization that was filed in Brown County, so there's some merit there. On the other hand, there was a claim that we had no evidence. Well, at that point, we didn't have as much evidence. Now we have tons of evidence.
Yeah, baby.
And I want to tell you that, first of all, I want to thank you for coming out here today and supporting us, the effort that we're making. You know, I want to thank the plaintiffs from Green Bay, Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, and Madison. These plaintiffs are key because they had to be people from those individual communities. They want to hold Wisconsin Election Commission as well as the mayors of these cities accountable for the malfeasance that occurred during the November 3rd election. And a huge debt of gratitude goes to the Amistad Project for funding the legal battle in Wisconsin. Attorney Eric Cardell and his staff have worked tirelessly to put these cases together. They have poured through literally thousands of pages of evidence, correspondence from the mayors and their staffs, and outside organizations like CTCL. And I have to say a special thank you to our Assembly and Senate, as they have been working very hard on the voter integrity issue. If it weren't for the FOIA information brought forward by Representatives Sortwell and Branson, we wouldn't be here today. Senator Andre Jacques and others have been great supporters of what we're trying to accomplish. And you know, it was mentioned by Eric, I want to really recognize the real hero in all of this, and that is, hello, that is Chris Teskey of Green Bay. Chris had the courage to stand against the Green Bay mayor and his staff and his unlawful approach to the 2000 election. If it weren't for Chris's courage, it is likely we wouldn't really ever have known how bad things really were. We have documented that the elected officials of the Wisconsin 5 cities colluded with the private organizations like CTCL, who doled out the Zuckerbucks to obtain the election results Mark Zuckerberg willfully supported, and he wanted results, just as Eric had said. He didn't give this $400 million across America just because he's a nice guy. He wanted results. And you know, it makes a person like me very angry, upset, and disappointed that the election was stolen. All of us have went to the polls thinking that this is a safe and true election, but guess what? At the end of the day, it wasn't. You know, if we do not stop the flow of this illegal money into our election process, we've lost our country. End of discussion. So at this point, what I would like to do is turn the mic over to Janelle. Well, the mic isn't going to do anything. Are you going to be able to yell loud enough? Let me see if I can get this working.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. It's a real privilege to have the final city to be held accountable, Madison, right? So let me ask you, are you okay? Uh-oh. Hello? Are you okay with third-party money in Wisconsin? No! Democrat or Republican, do you want outside forces in working with your clerks to maybe make some decisions in one party's decision or the other? Do you want that? No! I mean, you gotta think about it. We actually have the emails from Milwaukee where Michael Spitzer Rubenstein says, "Can I have access to WisVote?"
No!
Can you imagine outside groups getting access to WisVote?
No!
I mean, think about it. That means that if somebody from New York, New Jersey, California makes a contribution to a community, that they get to have access to WisVote and know exactly by ward.
Two-fisted miking there.
Is this what? Oh, maybe not. I'm meant for this. That means that if somebody comes to this community with a third-party money, that they get access to our clerks, Republican or Democrat. Do we want that? No! That's insane, right? That makes no sense at all. Now, the clerk from Milwaukee had good sense. She said, no, I'm not going to give you access. But she gave the information every day by ward and address as outstanding ballots. Think about that. That's the perfect opportunity to do something, I don't know, that's illegal in this state. It's called ballot harvesting. Do we want that in Wisconsin? No! Listen, I am really grateful that you're here today because this is not just about the legislature. This is not just about a lawsuit. This is about making sure that Wisconsin has transparent and fair elections. And without that, we know that the republic is doomed, right? Yeah. This is a bigger issue, and it's a conversation that both sides should come to the table, including our governor, and make the determination, because it's well known that if the Tea Party in Waukesha was counting the votes and the money came from the Koch brothers, there would be outrage and be on the front page of the paper every single day.
Oh, we got another one.
It's a third one, wow. Third time's a charm. God bless you for coming here and having a voice, because without all of us working together, there will be no election integrity in the state of Wisconsin. Thank you for working with us. Thank you to Eric. Thank you so much to Ron. And with that, I'm going to introduce a guy that you've heard many times, Senator Andre Jacques.
Andre!
No, Andre, you're first. All right. Somebody who is a huge help in making sure that we got to spend Valentine's Day going through 20,000 emails, because that's the way I like to spend my Valentine's Day. Representative Shea Sortwell.
Great job. Great job, Shane.
Thank you all for coming. So it's rare that a public official asks to have an open records request submitted against them. But that is exactly what the clerk from Green Bay asked for. She was growing frustrated and angry with what was going on in her city, and I had a hard time getting a hold of her. She'd gone on leave because she was so angry and frustrated by what was going on. But I finally tracked down her cell phone number, not an easy thing to do, I might add. But I eventually tracked it down, and I called her up and I said, Chris Teskey, I've known you for a long time. You've always been professional. You've always done a great job administrating elections in the city of Green Bay as clerk and then previously as the election specialist in the city. And I said, tell me, I've heard rumors, I've seen shadows, just tell me, is there something really going on, or is this just sour grapes, angry people, and that happens in every election? She said, Shay, I want you to do an open records request on my emails. And I said to Chris, well, Chris, what am I going to find? And she told me, look, Shay, this isn't public yet, but I am resigning by the end of this year, and I am afraid of retribution from the mayor of Green Bay. So I can't tell this publicly yet, but please do an open records request on my emails and you will find what you are looking for, what you are hearing about. That was extremely brave of Chris. And when people when people say, we trust our election officials, that's what we hear from the Democrats. Well, who's trusting Chris Teskey? It's certainly not them. They don't seem to care when Chris Teskey is raising red flags and saying, I don't want these people in my city. I don't want the money coming in. They don't understand Wisconsin law. Keep them out of the process. And the mayor continually overrides her. How is that not corruption from the Democrat mayor of Green Bay? Woo! Now look, Janelle touched on something very critical here. This would be just as wrong if we had the Koch brothers coming in and changing election processes in Waukesha. But somehow, my Democrat colleagues don't seem to understand the fact that if this is how you are going to change the game, don't you think the other side is going to come back in with their money? We passed the bill in the other day, and you said, well, I think the Senate passed it too already, to say that third-party money cannot be changed in our election processes. The governor needs to sign that bill.
Sign that
bill. Because I don't want third-party groups coming in and changing our election processes. Look, I am perfectly fine if the Democrat Party decides to buy a Winnebago and drive around and encourage people to vote. That's called election politicking. It's called campaigning. Perfectly legitimate for them to do. It's very different when the city itself is purchasing this and going into communities that favor one party or another. That's very, very different. And we need to acknowledge this, that this is so much bigger than one single election. So I stand with Chris Teskey. I stand with our clerks that try to do the right thing. And I encourage you all to contact your representatives and senators and the governor's office and tell them to keep pushing this. Because we need to resolve this and make sure that in 2022, or heck, the spring elections next year, in the spring of 2022 for the April elections, that we don't have third parties changing our system. That's what this is about. The Democrats like to talk about third-party money influencing our elections. Well, once again, it's one thing when a third-party money is encouraging people to vote. It's another thing when they're corrupting our city processes, our election processes themselves. So thank you all for coming, and I believe I'm going to be turning over to Andre Jacques, who's been another great champion for this cause, and I got to go to a committee meeting, so thank you all.
Well, thank you, Shay. Great to see everybody out here today. It's been an honor to work with my colleagues on election integrity reform. Working on some bills right now with Representative Branchin, but certainly many of my colleagues have a deep concern with what occurred this past election cycle. And quite honestly, it's a concern that we had going back to the previous election cycle and many cycles before that. In fact, basically voter fraud is something that I saw firsthand and reported from my time as a student at the UW. So these are not necessarily new issues, but as I told Governor Scott Walker and Attorney General Brad Schimmel 2 years ago, now more than 2 years ago, it's a lot of the same issues then as it is now, where you have the fox guarding the hen house in Dane and Milwaukee County. And I can also tell you that I used to serve with Chris Teskey. I'm a former City of Green Bay employee, and so when Shay put in his open records request, guess who got to go to City Hall and pick that up? Some post-traumatic stress there, but just kidding. I don't want to make light of that, but it is something where I served in the legislature with folks like Eric Genrich and Corey Mason. I know John Antaramian. These are the mayors, former, again, partisan Democratic state legislators that have assumed the office of mayor in some of the largest cities in the state of Wisconsin, basically coordinating together to change the way that elections are handled. And I don't care who you are, I don't see how it's a positive thing for us to, next year, allow for, whether it's the Republican Attorney General's Association or the Democratic Governors Association or People for the American Way, or whatever good-sounding nonprofit name you can come up with, to be able to basically purchase the election process in Wisconsin. So I'm very proud to have testified in support of that legislation. And I can tell you that this is something that obviously we have a lot more work to do. We have a lot of work in front of us. Governor Evers signed those bills, but we've got a lot more that we're going to have to do likely when Governor Evers is no longer in office. But I will just say that I'm pleased to join these efforts in support of election integrity. This is something that we can't give up the fight. And, you know, there was a lot of criticism for myself and Representative Branchin, Representative Murphy, Representative Sortwell, so many of the others here, just because we asked for further investigations. We wanted that audit. We wanted there to be, you know, a thorough look at everything that had occurred in the most recent election. And just as you peel back the layers of the onion, we're finding more and more, and certainly in regards to the Center for Tech and Civic Life. So anyways, I want to thank the Wisconsin Voter Alliance, all those that have, as citizens, done that work through the court system that we as legislators have not been able to do because of Governor Evers. And with that, I want to turn it over to one of those brave citizens, Colonel Richard Kuchsdorf.
Hey, thanks, Andre.
Good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Before I say anything, whatever, I just want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank these brave citizens for coming forward and doing their part, because you know it takes people like that coming forward to. This is a team effort. There's no one group or one person doing this. Anyway, my name is Rich Kuchsdorf. I'm the chairman for H.O.T County Republican Party. I did 34 years in the military. I did 2 combat commands in Iraq. And when I joined the military, just like anybody else in the military, I took an oath, and it said, I will support and defend the United States Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And anybody that took that oath, if you'll remember, there was no expiration date. When you got out of the military, that oath still applies. So on November 3rd, 2020, Zuckerberg money and what the Wisconsin Election Commission allowed during the presidential elections qualifies as domestic actions against the U.S. Constitution, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion. So what did I do? I joined the fight with Ron Hoyer of Wisconsin Voters Alliance, and everyone should join the Wisconsin Voters Alliance. Everybody should want, it shouldn't matter your party, everybody should want open, honest, transparent elections.
Amen.
I was in Iraq for 2 elections, one in October, one in December. And we knew the results by late in the evening on the day of the elections. And I told Janelle, I said, the reason I think that we knew that is because those people for decades had never been able to vote. And they wanted to have fair elections. And we have 72 counties in this state. And the majority of the people want fair elections. But I think there's a demonstration here of some folks, 5 cities, that don't want, and they worked very hard to not have fair elections. And if we don't stop this now, what Mark Zuckerberg started with this outside money, he demonstrated he could do it with the presidential election, in my opinion. So once he's done that, why would you think you would ever be able to elect whoever you want to the village board, county board, or your school board? And why would you think he wouldn't invite all the millionaires from Hollywood to contribute to that? Why wouldn't George Soros? Why wouldn't Bill Gates or any of those other left-leaning folks contribute to that? So you need to take a stand now. If you don't stand and fight, we'll be forced to have our children be taught the fake 1619 project and the made-up academic endeavor called the critical race theory. They're going to be taught that in school, and you're not going to be able to stop it. We also are going to have to accept socialism. So if you don't want to get involved, I guess I can maybe understand that, but I really can't. In Wisconsin, in the military jargon, when you do an offensive operation, you have lines of effort. In Wisconsin, we have 2 lines of effort. One is being led by the Wisconsin Voters Alliance with Ron Hoyer and Eric Cardell and the Amistad Project. And the second line of effort is a legislative effort being led by Janelle Branchin and her cohorts up in the Assembly. So you need to want to help them. I understand a lot of people are afraid to get involved. I understand that. Fear is real. But Aristotle said, there's only one way to avoid criticism. Do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. So tell your friends not to be afraid. If you believe America is still a great country, then we should all want to fight to save and give this country to our children. You should join the Wisconsin Voter Alliance. God bless America. Thank you, Mr. Cardell. Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to take a minute. I'm State Representative Dave Murphy, and it's been a pleasure to work with Janelle Branchins on the Elections Commission. I feel like we're doing God's work here in trying to clean up elections in Wisconsin. I live in Greenville, Wisconsin, a little town outside of Appleton. During last April's election, actually the April before, the town of Greenville had 2 polling places open. How many did the city of Green Bay have open? Exactly 2. The same number as my little town had open. Why was that? What is this really all about? If you're looking at what they're trying to accomplish, this is about get out the vote. So get out the vote has cost parties, our political parties, millions of dollars throughout the years to try to get their voters out. But COVID gave them a unique opportunity to keep our voters at home and to get their votes in. How did they do that? The Zuckerberg money came into Green Bay, $1.6 million. This is an astounding amount of money for a city like Green Bay. And what does that money get used for? It's to get out the vote. It's to get absentee ballots into the hands of Democratic voters and get them back in. At the same time, you're tamping down on in-person voting, which is what Republicans thought they needed to do to make sure that their vote got counted. So as you can see, this whole thing increased their voters and decreased our voters. And so what we need to do going forward is this has got to stop. And if you think about it, where is the money? Follow the trail of the money. Every one of the large billionaires in this country, the $50 billion people, the $100 billion people, who are they? They're Bezos, they're Gates, they're Buffett, they're Soros, they're Bloomberg. Go right down the line. All those large billionaires are Democrats. And we are being swamped, just absolutely swamped with money here in Wisconsin trying to steal these elections. It's a travesty. And we have a small group in our elections committee, and we are working feverishly to fight this kind of fraud and abuse in our election system. And we do it because of people like you. The people that are out here supporting us and saying, hey guys, keep going, keep fighting. And it's really, really important to me, and I know it's important to Janelle and everybody else that's on our committee. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today, and just God bless every single one of you.
Yeah, I'm just going to wrap up here quickly. I wanted to thank everyone for participating. These sort of efforts, when the government overreaches, government violates the Constitution, violates state law, here with private corporations to basically, affect the result of the election. It's kind of interesting, these populist reactions, because what ends up happening is like sort of ordinary people like us have leaders like Janelle Branchen here, Representative Shortwell, Representative Murphy, Senator Jock. All these, we're all ordinary people. And so when you're ordinary like we are, and you're fighting the best and brightest, right? Can you imagine America's best and brightest work so hard with $400 million from Zuckerberg, I've heard $230 million from Soros, to circumvent Wisconsin election laws to affect the result. The best and brightest of America are working to circumvent the election laws so they can affect the result. And so ordinary people have to rise up. We're a ragtag bunch, right? We're a ragtag bunch. We're the rabble, right? The rabble rise to fight the best and brightest, right? And so that's who we are. That's what we are. Then when you look at what we're setting out to do, the best and brightest, including the established media, said, well, where's your evidence? Well, you heard how it started with Representative Shortwell and Chris Teskey and the clerk of Green Bay. Then we got the evidence on Green Bay, we got the evidence on Racine, we got the evidence on Kenosha, we got the evidence in Milwaukee, and now we hear the evidence in Madison. All right, now what do you do? Once you have the evidence, then what do? You invite them to debate, right? I know Janelle's ready, Representative Murphy's ready, Shortwell's ready, I'm ready. Let's debate. Come on, local media, let's debate. Come on, establishment media, let's debate. Is this something you want? I can go on the street in Madison and I can tell this story factually, and virtually everyone on the street agrees. Even in Madison, private corporations do not belong in election administration. They don't want it, we don't want it. The oligarchs, the billionaires want it because they want to control your elections in Wisconsin, and that's wrong. And so that's where we're at. And I've been at this place a lot of times suing the government. I've been suing the government for 25 years, and what happens is, when I'm representing ordinary people, the government says, when I say, you're violating the law, they say, well, we're following a lot of other laws. No, you're violating this law. And that's what's happening here. Well, they're the officials, they're following lots of laws, but they didn't follow this law. And it's a big law, Article 1 and Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the state law. So now we're going to the Wisconsin Election Commission. You've got the evidence, you've got these legislative leaders behind you, you've got the lawyer, and guess what we have in the Wisconsin Election Commission? An even playing field. Guess what we have? We have to appeal if we lose the Wisconsin Election Commission. A level playing field. That's all we ever wanted. So all we ever wanted in the election was a level playing field. We wanted a fair chance to win. And it was unfair. You were stolen. And the colonel spoke, lest we forget. Lest we forget this election. Because if we forget this election, it's going to happen to your children and your children's children. It's going to happen over and over again. The left's best and brightest are going to continue to do this. So this is the day you should join the Wisconsin Voters Alliance. This is the day you should join this effort. And a dog will have a sock or something, won't drop it. Well, if you're a populist, you don't drop this issue until it's resolved. We have to go all the way as a team, inform people, educate people, get online, tell Governor Evers, tell these mayors, this is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. I mean, these 5 mayors should already be gone, right? Yes. I mean, the 5 mayors took your election away. You were entitled to a fair and impartial election. They engaged in this process to take the fair election away. So purposeful, so intentional, and so wrong. And so I want to wrap up on that point that basically if we don't do this, it's 1,000 to 0. But with us here, it's 1,000 to 1, and we got a chance.
Thank you, Eric. And one more time from the Wisconsin Voter Alliance, thank you so much for being here today. And you're going to be hearing more from us. Just, if you would, please become a member, and that way you can get onto our mail list, and you'll be kept up to speed on what we're doing next. So one more time, thank you very much. Have a great day.